Hi, it's Emily from O Magic Hour. I am back to talk to you guys. I know that I told you the next video I was going to make was going to be a book review, and I promise I will do one very soon. But I saw a video today from Ashley at Climb the Stacks that I really thought was interesting, and I wanted to kind of jump into that conversation with you guys today. So I will link her original video below. It's really great, as are all of her videos. She reviews primarily, I would say, classics or things that you would consider classics on her channel, and I've gotten some really awesome recommendations from her. And also she posts really thoughtful conversation topics like this one about you know, reading and reviewing and that kind of thing. So I definitely recommend her channel if by some odd reason you haven't already found it on your own. Okay, so she posted a video, definitely go watch it, on negative reviews. And I wanted to talk about that too because I think that's a really interesting question. I am originally from the blog world, and I know a lot of people in that world who will not review a book on their blog unless they can give it 3+ stars. So if it's a do not finish or a DNF, a 1-star or 2-star, in their minds, they don't even want to put it on their blog because they don't want it to be negative. On the other hand, I know other people who love posting DNF reviews or 1-star reviews, and that's one of the things that they post, and they're funny and they get shared on Twitter and everybody likes them and that kind of thing. And I admit I've totally laughed at some of them before because sometimes it's just kind of amusing. But the question is, what's best about either a negative review or a positive review, right? So are positive reviews necessarily dishonest? If you say, oh my gosh, I love this book, it's wonderful, and you don't say anything critical about it, is that necessarily dishonest? Or is a negative review like a bad PR move? Does that make sense? She actually kind of broke down her conversation along 2 lines. One is avoiding having to make negative reviews because you're thoughtful about the kind of books that you pick. And the second is just negative reviews themselves. And I want to talk about both of those things. So for me, the way that I pick books is I put a lot of pre-research into the books that I pick. I do look at Goodreads to see the general star rating. I don't rely on it because I know stars mean different things for different people, but I will scan reviews of some of my friends, not necessarily to read it in depth, but to see, does it have a love triangle? Am I in the mood for that? Is it a contemporary? Am I in the mood for that? Is the writing style good? How do I feel about that? So I will get some of their positives and negatives before even adding a book to my TBR, right? And that also is true for books that I accept for review. So if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I do have some books that I accept for review periodically. And I don't just go out there and request books or accept books that I've never heard of just because, oh my gosh, it's so wonderful to get a book for free, right? I will only accept a book for a review if it's something that I think I have a legitimate chance of liking. Because when I accept a book for review, I'm basically telling that publisher that I will review it. And I don't want to pay them back by accepting books I have no interest in and don't expect to like, and then give a crappy review to that book. That's obviously not the expectation, right? Now, that being said, Ashley mentioned that she would feel bad giving a negative review to a book she had accepted, either from the publisher or for the author. I don't feel that bad about it. I mean, I think that's part of the agreement, is to give an honest review. And so I'm very comfortable giving a negative review if I need to. There have been times when I have disliked a review book so much that I have contacted the publisher and just said, look, I'm sorry, I will have nothing positive to say about this book. I'm going to choose not to review it. I appreciate your time and I hope to work with you again, that kind of a thing. But for the most part, I review all books that I get from publishers and that kind of thing. And I don't feel bad if I'm kind of iffy on a book at the end of the day. Aside from Goodreads, the way that I research books, either before accepting them for a review or before just reading them myself, is authors. I know obviously that's one great way to pick a book if there's an author that you've read time and time again and like. Blog reviews and booktube reviews from people that I trust. I consume a lot of blogs and booktube, but there's only, I would say, a handful of people that if they say they love a book, I know I will probably also love that book. I certainly take the other opinions into account, and there are people for whom if they recommend a contemporary, I know I'll probably like it, or if they recommend a fantasy, I know I'll probably like it. But I think that there's a lot of booktube and blogosphere out there, and you can appreciate the content somebody makes without having to take on every recommendation for yourself. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's another way that I do it. There are also publishers I tend to trust more than others, especially in the genre fiction that I read. Like Tor is one of my favorite fantasy publishers, and I know that if they publish something, there's maybe a chance I'm gonna like it better than maybe other publishers. So that's something. So I think that's step one to not having to decide, am I gonna put a negative review or a positive review? Like Ashley said, is just discernment about what kind of books you even select to read. If you put a little bit of pre-work into the books that you read, you're not wasting your reading time, which is limited, on books that you don't give a rip about. And then you have to decide, oh, am I gonna publish a negative review or not? Okay, so that's kind of step one. How do I even pick the books that I read? Step two, negative reviews. Okay, I am not, personally, like Ashley said, I am not the kind of person who's going to probably write just a scathing review. If I hate a book, I'm going to put it down, right? That doesn't happen that often, to be perfectly honest with you. I can think of a small handful of books that I've DNF'd recently, but if I DNF a book, I'm not going to review it. I don't think that that is, for me, fair necessarily, as to review a book that I don't know the end of it. Maybe there's some twist at the end. Maybe some of the character arcs make more sense. Maybe, you know, who knows? But so for me, I'm not going to review a book that I didn't finish, probably. But aside from that, I think that it's also important not to put sort of scathing reviews out there for me, because like Ashley said, there's every chance that the author, especially if it's a current author working today, involved in social media, is going to see what I have put out there about their work. And I know that I don't want kind of to be putting a lot of negativity about somebody's work. I think that that is a really important distinction, though, between being critical and critical thinking and just being negative, or between being critical and between criticism. I actually think it's my responsibility as a reviewer to think with a critical eye about what I'm reading and not just kind of blindly, you know, oh, I loved it, or wasn't for me, or oh, it stunk. Because that doesn't give you, as the person choosing to consume my content, any idea as to whether you will like it, right? Because my really strong feeling is that there is a book out there for everyone, but not every book is for me. Does that make sense? So there may be a book, there actually are books, for example, that I know of that some of my very good friends love and recommend and just adore, and then I've picked them up and they're really not for me. Either I think the fantasy tropes are too recognizable, or I don't like the character development, or it's a plot that involves cheating partners, which is just one of my pet peeves. I don't like books like that. Or harming kids. I cannot handle books that have harming kids. That's part of what I pre-research for. Also, those things that I know I don't really love. But if I accidentally stumble upon a book like that and end up reading it, it's very likely it's not going to be a 4 or 5 star read for me. So I try to say, here are the reasons that this book was maybe not for me, but here are all the things that I think were good about this book and defensible about this book and were good decisions by the author. And I can see how for someone else they may have worked, but for me, it just didn't work. And that's okay. We don't have a responsibility to love every single book that we ever read. And in fact, I think we have a responsibility to think about the books that we read. Is that book depicting women in a way that we think is good? Is that book depicting men in a way that we think that's good? Is it depicting relationship in a way that we think is good? And you know what? You can like a book, like Ashley said, actually, you can like a book that has those problematic aspects, but you also should be recognizing them and letting people know about them and that kind of thing. So you can be critical about some writing choices maybe that an author made without saying this book is junk and crap and I don't know why they ever wrote it. Does that distinction make sense? Because to me, I would much rather 10 times out of 10 read a critical review with critical thinking that says this is what worked, this is what didn't work, there are things that I liked, but at the end of the day it was really a mediocre read for me, because then I can take that, process it, and say, well, they didn't like that it happened to be a fantasy novel, or they didn't like the YA tone of that, but maybe that's something that I really totally like. And so despite the fact that they didn't like that, I might pick it up anyway. And actually some of my favorite comments on my blog are comments where people say, oh, I totally get that was a 3-star read for you, but you know what? The things that you outlined that you liked about that book sound really good to me, and I'm gonna pick it up anyway, because I'm totally down for that. I don't care if people are reading things that I think have whatever literary merit is. I just want people to kind of be reading and to be working to discover what their book fingerprint is, what kind of books maybe kind of ring their bell, what kind of books they love, because that answer is as different for people as, you know, anything. There's going to be no two people that like the exact same books all the way down the line. And so I think it's important to keep reading so that you can exercise that discernment that we kind of talked about in step one, so that you're not picking up books time and time again that you don't end up liking, because that's how people end up being non-readers. And that's what I definitely don't want to put out in the world. I spend a lot of time on this hobby, book blogging and making videos now, in order to maybe entice people to read, right? I mean, that's really the reason that we all do this, right, is to promote that. And so if I write a negative review, the only thing that I'm doing is maybe convincing somebody not to pick up a book, whereas that's not really why I'm in this business or why I have this hobby. So for me, in summary, I think the best things that you can do regarding negative reviews are, one, just exercise some discernment. Don't just go crazy if you're getting offered free books and just pick up every single one that you can think of. You know, don't read things just because, you know, somebody has recommended it that maybe you haven't liked other of their recommendations. Just exercise discernment when you're picking up books, and I think that that will help alleviate a lot of the problem. But then I think that when it comes to a negative review, just be thoughtful about, is this review going to help people find things that they love to read? And, you know, maybe for you the best way to do that is to make a negative review and to maybe tell people not to pick up that book. And that's fine. I totally appreciate that. I've read that. I've consumed those negative reviews before. I have no problem with that. But for me, my hope is to find reader and perfect book and get them together. And writing a wholly negative, scathing review is not going to accomplish that for me. So anyway, I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about this. Do you prefer negative reviews? Do you prefer wholly positive reviews? Do you like reviews that give you a little bit of both sides? And I can't wait to talk with you about this. Okay, well anyway, I look forward to talking to you guys again soon. I will be back soon with a book review, I promise. And in the meantime, feel free to check out my blog, which will be linked down below. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye!